So Max over at the YouTube channel Landfather put out a video, the world's greatest natural fire starter, I think was the title on it, and he was talking about fatwood in that video. Well, I commented to him that I use birch bark to start my fires, and that it's great, and there's a lot less processing or effort required. It would have been nice to do a side-by-side comparison of the two, but I don't have any fatwood, and I frankly just don't really feel like going and collecting any. So for this, since I have birch bark, but for Max, as he pointed out to me, is that in South Carolina they don't really have access to birch trees, so it's not really an option for him. He's still, anyways, yeah. So birch bark, as you can see, now that I put the camera down, if I bring over here my ugly wood pile, learned a long time ago that if your wood pile is a work of art, you're burning the wrong kind of wood. It should be ugly wood pile. So inside of here, that can is full of birch bark. This bag here, that's all full of birch bark as well. So unlike with a fatwood, or there's a whole process, you got to find it, you got to locate the trees that have it. If you know what you're looking for, it's a lot easier to find. But then there's the whole, you can take a look at his video, and he shows you how he prepares his anyways. In my case, with birch bark, I burn a lot of birch. Half my wood pile is birch, and the other half is harder woods like maple, black cherry, hickory, elm, that sort of species. It's a longer burning, more same BTUs per pound, but it's a heavier wood, so you get more heat out of it. Anyways, back to the birch bark. To harvest the birch bark, all of that stuff that you saw in the cans was all harvested at the time when I was cutting and splitting this stuff, because it just sort of peels off and falls off. But you can see very quickly, you pull that bark off, put it in the can, there you go. I've got fire starter. I'm done. That's the entire process. As I'm cutting and splitting, sometimes it falls off, other times it doesn't. So this one here, you see, as it dries, this all peels off. So inside the house as well, I've got more containers that, as I bring the wood into the house, or as I build fires, I pull this off, set it aside, and only use what I need for to start any given fire. I've come to determine, or realize, I guess, that generally speaking, even using pieces of wood this size, I usually start my fires in the house with 3 pieces of wood. And I can use those 3 pieces, peeling off what bark is loose and comes off easily, leaving on the rest of it. This part of the bark here still has a lot of resins in it and stuff. As you can see, I can peel it off. I can start that without any real kindling if I put a good wad of birch bark. And when I say a good wad of birch bark in amongst it, what I just peeled off of that tree, plus, that piece of firewood, plus I figure if I put together what comes off the other pieces as well, I'm probably looking at a bundle about that size. That will usually get those 3 pieces of wood going without any real effort. Not every piece is going to yield fire starter for you, or kindling, or bark. So like this one here, again, I can still peel that off. Takes a little more effort, but that's a good piece of bark. This one, however, I'm not getting the bark off of that one. See the way it's growing there? It's just, it's on. It's not coming off. It's not really worth it. However, when you put that in the stove, it's got the bark on it, so it only takes a little bit of bark in amongst this, that when you light it, this will all burn as well. And it gets a really good, as long as you give it as much air as it wants, as much oxygen, it gets burning really well. So what I'm going to try and do here is give a demonstration. It's really for Max, but for anybody else who is interested. He really wanted to see the birch bark burning, see how it burns, and this isn't how I start a fire in my house or anywhere really. Well, I guess if it's a campfire or something like that. Like I said, when I start the fires in the house, I try to just get it going. I don't feel like going through a whole process of a little bit of kindling. I have used the top-down fire starting, which I can, yeah, I guess I'll probably do a video on that. It goes against conventional wisdom where you start the fire by putting all your big logs and stacking everything the way you want them on the bottom, and then your kindling goes on top, and then your fire starter goes on top of that. And so you start the fire on top of this pile of larger pieces of wood. And the heat radiating plus the coals and stuff falling down in amongst the other pieces gets the fire going. People always think that it's the flame that starts the fire or that keeps the fire going or gets the other stuff burning, when it's not actually. It's the heat that pyrolyzes the wood. But I guess I'll get into all that. This is getting a little bit too much. But anyways, you can build a fire from the top down. And it's actually probably a better way of doing it. But for demonstration purposes here, I'm just going to start a little fire. So another consideration that I didn't mention to Matt is that even just cedar is pretty much available everywhere. And if, sorry about my hand, if you have access to cedar, which most people do, you can use the cedar just to start fires. It by itself is really a pretty good fire starter. It burns real as long as it's dried and seasoned. But if you split it, cedar split's really nice, as you can see. These pieces here that I have a sawmill, which is other videos that I've had for sawmilling. So I have recommended in a short, I believe, that when you're slabbing your first cuts, rather than taking thick slabs off, you take little thin slabs like that. I like using these for kindling, but I've also got a video that that shows me putting up siding or using it as siding. It's just a ways of getting as much out of your logs as you possibly can. I'm really getting into a lot of different subjects here now. This is supposed to be about birch bark, but it's the way my brain works. And I've learned to just go with it. So anyways, with cedar in particular, when you're cutting it, you can get that stuff to split quite thin. I'll just peel that off now. So you can see how thin that piece is there. So it by itself is as good as, maybe even better than the wood on a match. So I believe they're still making matches with poplar. Could be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. But you can see I've got match going, and just like that, the cedar is lit. So you have a few pieces like that in your fireplace, or like I said, if you have little offcuts of this, and you split it nice and thin like that, that's, in my opinion anyways, that's as good as any fatwood or as good as birch bark. A little more processing, a little more effort to get that stuff ready than it is for birch bark, but it's a lot easier to find. It's accessible to most people. Just make sure you, well, like I said, if you have a sawmill, you cut them nice and thin. If not, then you take the larger pieces and you split them up into smaller chunks that you can then let season. Nice seasoned cedar, can't beat it as a fire starter. Other than maybe birch bark. Because birch bark, this stuff, get this wet, you're not getting that lit. Birch bark will light even when it's wet. As I believe is the same thing with fatwood. Anyways, get back on topic here. Put my gloves back on because it's cold. Minus 15 last night. That's Celsius. So, demonstration purposes here for a fire. Silly now. Probably use a little more wood on there, but see how this turns out. So we'll do two things before I light that. Show a piece of birch bark. Well, I'll get a bigger piece for wasting my birch bark for this. You guys are working. So, down there. Keep that match lit. Okay, so there you go, Max. That's birch bark. So there's all kinds of oils in the birch bark, which is why it's waterproof. Stick that under there. See if that'll. Which is why they used it for making birch bark canoes, because it is waterproof. So at this point now, we've still just got the birch bark. That's still burning in there. You can see down inside there. That's still just the birch bark that's burning in there. So it does burn for quite a while. If you've got enough of it, if you've got the right amount. And there now, you can see that the wood in here is actually burning. So that fire is officially started. That will keep going. And that's why I use birch bark.